The moment champagne bottles popped in the break room and someone's drink splashed across the LED display, I knew they wouldn't pay me. No money, no recognition, not even basic decency. What they didn't know was that buried deep in that stack of vendor contracts, I was the ticking time bomb waiting to detonate. They celebrated our record-breaking quarter while erasing my name from every achievement, but I held the kill switch to their entire analytics empire, and they had no idea what was coming. My name is Amelia Cross, and at 29, I'd built something extraordinary. As lead data engineer at Brightspan Analytics in Riverton's gleaming tech corridor, I'd created a system that made our competitors look like they were still using Excel spreadsheets from the 90s. Perfect uptime for 18 months straight. Real-time visualization that turned chaos into clarity. Sales reports that didn't just inform decisions, they predicted the future. The celebration that Thursday afternoon should have been my moment. The conference room overflowed with bodies, the smell of expensive catering mixing with too much cologne. Our CEO Harold Dunn raised his glass, his voice booming over the chatter about revolutionary metrics and game-changing insights. The Q4 numbers on the screen behind him showed a 340% increase in client retention. My algorithms had identified patterns nobody else saw, saved 3 major accounts from churning, and brought in $12 million in new revenue. This achievement belongs to our incredible team, Harold announced, gesturing broadly. Especially our leadership, Nathan Cole, whose vision made this possible. Nathan, my direct manager, stood there soaking in applause with that political smile he'd perfected, the one that never quite reached his eyes. The same smile he wore when he took my architectural proposals and presented them as his own. When he scheduled meetings with stakeholders while I was conveniently heads down on critical tasks, when he inserted himself between me and every opportunity for visibility, the projector displayed a slide. Q4 Success Team. 7 names. Mine wasn't there. Marketing was there. Sales, obviously. Even Brad from Customer Success, whose biggest contribution was remembering to refill the coffee machine. But the person who'd written every line of code, who'd spent 60-hour weeks debugging integration nightmares, who'd literally slept under her desk during the November deployment, invisible. I stood in the back corner, holding a plastic cup of flat champagne I hadn't touched. Around me, people I'd trained were taking selfies, updating LinkedIn, adding transformed company analytics infrastructure to their profiles. Jessica from Product Management, who once asked me if SQL was like HTML, was explaining to an investor how we had optimized the data pipeline. After the crowd thinned, Nathan found me by my desk. He walked with that casual authority of men who'd never been questioned, his designer sneakers silent on the polished concrete floor. "Great work this quarter, Amelia," he said, leaning against my monitor. "Really solid stuff." The bonus structure was clear, I said, keeping my voice level. 15% for exceeding targets by over 200%. We hit 340%. He shifted, that political smile flickering. "Yeah, about that. Budget's tight. You know how it is, optics and all. The C-suite wants to be conservative with comp this cycle. But hey, great experience for you, right? This kind of work, it's going to open doors." The contract specified, I know. Look, I fought for you, I really did. But my hands are tied. Policy stuff, you understand. He patted my shoulder, that dismissive, patronizing gesture that said the conversation was over, and walked away, already pulling out his phone to check his stock portfolio. The same portfolio, fattened by options granted for his technical innovations. I sat there as the office emptied, listening to the hum of servers I'd configured, watching dashboards I'd designed tick through their updates. Every query optimized. Every visualization pixel perfect. Every alert calibrated to prevent disasters before they happened. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd accept it like I'd accepted everything else, the stolen credit, the excluded meetings, the casual erasure of my contributions. They thought I was just another quiet engineer who'd complain in private and show up Monday morning anyway. They had no idea what they'd just activated, because 3 months ago, When I'd negotiated our analytics vendor contract, I'd insisted on something unusual. A modification to Addendum B that seemed like paranoid over-documentation. Nathan had laughed when he signed it, joking about engineers and their edge cases. He wasn't laughing now, but only because he'd already forgotten it existed. I pulled up the contract on my screen, scrolling to the buried clause that would soon reshape everything. In the event that the primary technical administrator named in this addendum is removed from compensated status without proper severance as defined in Schedule C, all licenses granted under this agreement shall immediately terminate. They'd celebrated too early. The champagne hadn't even gone flat yet, and I was already planning their funeral. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking Riverton's financial district, laptop open, studying the document that would become their undoing. The clause wasn't an accident, it was my insurance policy. Negotiated during a particularly chaotic vendor renewal when everyone was too focused on price points to read the fine print. The beauty was in its simplicity. I wasn't just listed as a technical contact. I was designated as the essential technical administrator, whose employment status was tied to license validity. The vendor, Dataflow Systems, had actually pushed back initially, calling it unusual. But I'd convinced them it was about ensuring continuity, that Brightspan couldn't just eliminate the position and leave the system unmaintained. They'd agreed, probably assuming no company would be stupid enough to trigger it. They assumed wrong. I opened my encrypted folder, labeled innocuously as Tax Documents 2019, and began my preparation. First, the email trail, where Nathan explicitly promised the bonus in writing. Then, the Slack messages where he'd acknowledged my contributions before taking credit in the executive summary. The Git commits showing 94% of the codebase bearing my digital signature. The architecture diagrams I'd created at 2 a.m. later presented as team collaborations. But I didn't react. Not yet. The next morning, I arrived at the office at my usual 7:30 a.m., an hour before most of the team. I made coffee, reviewed the overnight alerts, responded to emails with my typical efficiency. When Nathan walked by with his Monday morning enthusiasm, I even smiled back. "How's the migration project looking?" he asked, not really caring about the answer. "On track," I replied. "Should have the test environment ready by Wednesday." "Perfect. Keep me looped in." He wouldn't need to worry about Wednesday. I worked methodically through the week, documenting everything, every interaction, every decision, every moment they pretended I didn't exist. When the invitation for the strategic planning session went out to the entire engineering team, except me, I screenshot it. When Brad got promoted to senior analyst for his work on the Q4 dashboards, I saved the announcement. The beautiful thing about being invisible is that nobody watches you. While they planned their roadmaps and discussed their equity refreshers, I was creating my own documentation. A folder called Insurance grew larger each day. Contracts, communications, proof of ownership, system dependencies. On Wednesday, Jessica asked me to fix a query she'd broken. "It's super urgent," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Nathan needs it for the board deck." I fixed it in 12 minutes, a task that would have taken her days to figure out. She grabbed the code without a thank you, already rushing to her next meeting where she'd present my solution as her own troubleshooting prowess. I let her. Thursday brought the first sign they were planning to push me out completely. An email from HR about restructuring and role redundancy. They scheduled a meeting for the following Monday to discuss my transition plan. That evening, I pulled up the vendor contract one more time. The termination clause was airtight. No notice period, no grace period, no negotiation. The moment I was no longer a compensated employee, every dashboard, every report, every analytical function would simply stop working. Dataflow Systems had even built in a remote kill switch to ensure compliance. I composed an email to Dataflow's account manager, saved it in drafts. Subject line: Employment Status Change Notification, Contract Article 7.3.2. My finger hovered over send, but not yet. Timing was everything. Friday afternoon. Nathan called an impromptu team meeting. I wasn't invited, but I could hear them through the thin conference room walls. They were discussing the Amelia situation. She's technically competent, Nathan was saying, but she lacks leadership presence. We need someone who can interface with stakeholders. What about the system she built? Someone asked. Probably Kevin from DevOps. The only one with enough technical knowledge to be concerned. It's all documented, Nathan replied confidently. Brad's been getting up to speed. He'll take over primary administration. Brad, who last week had asked me what a join statement did, who thought Python was a type of Java, who would soon discover that taking credit and taking responsibility were very different things. I packed up my desk that evening slowly, methodically. Not enough to raise suspicion, just organizing, preparing. My personal laptop contained everything I needed. The company laptop would stay behind, clean and professional. With all passwords properly documented in the system, Brad would never be able to access once the license expired. Monday was coming. They thought it would be my execution. They had no idea it would be theirs. The weekend passed in careful preparation. I maintained my routine. Saturday morning run through Riverside Park, afternoon coffee at my usual spot, even responded to a few non-urgent work emails to keep up appearances. But every action was deliberate, calculated. I was a ghost preparing to haunt them. Sunday evening, I drafted 3 documents. The first, a comprehensive system handover that would never be read. The second, my resignation letter, professional and brief. The third, a timeline of exactly what would happen when the license expired. That one was just for me. A preview of the show I was about to watch. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for an execution. I dressed carefully, my best blazer, the one I'd worn to my interview 3 years ago when they'd promised me unlimited growth potential and recognition for outstanding contributions. The HR meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:45, made my usual coffee, and noticed how Brad was already at my desk, going through my documentation binders with the confidence of someone who'd never built anything from scratch. Getting familiar with the setup? I asked, voice neutral. He looked up, startled. Oh, yeah. Nathan wants me to be ready to take over. You know, for the transition. Of course, I smiled. Let me know if you have questions. He wouldn't have time to ask them. The HR office smelled like vanilla candles and corporate anxiety. Sarah from Human Resources sat across from me, her face arranged in that practiced expression of synthetic empathy they must teach in HR certification courses. Nathan sat beside her, avoiding eye contact. Amelia, Sarah began, sliding a folder across the table. As you know, Brightspan is evolving its technical structure. We're moving toward a more collaborative, stakeholder-facing engineering model. I opened the folder. Severance. 2 weeks. Health insurance, terminated immediately. Stock options, forfeit due to restructuring provisions. The role of isolated technical contributor is being deprecated, Nathan added, finally looking at me. We need engineers who can be faces of the company, isolated. After 3 years of carrying their technical infrastructure on my back. I understand, I said, pulling out my phone. Just need to send one quick email to wrap something up. Sarah nodded, probably relieved I wasn't making a scene. I opened my drafts, found the email to Dataflow Systems. My thumb hovered over send for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to appreciate the moment, not long enough for doubt. Send. When would you like me to transition my responsibilities? I asked, closing the folder. Brad's already up to speed, Nathan said quickly. We think a clean break would be best. Today will be your last day. Security will escort you to collect your things, Sarah added apologetically. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. They had no idea what they'd just initiated. I packed my desk under the watchful eye of Gary from security, a decent guy who looked embarrassed by the whole thing. My coffee mug, a few personal notebooks. A photo from the company retreat where I'd fixed the presentation system that crashed during Harold's keynote. I left the technical manuals, the system diagrams, the passwords all properly documented. Let them think I was being professional. Take care, Amelia. Nathan called out as I passed his office. That political smile again, already dismissing me from his mind. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Data flow systems, confirming receipt of my employment status change. The automated system would handle the rest. I sat in my car in the parking garage, engine off, watching my phone. The timeline I'd calculated gave them approximately 18 hours before the first dominoes fell. Overnight processes would fail first. The 3 a.m. reports the CFO relied on for morning meetings. Then the real-time dashboards would start timing out. By Tuesday afternoon, the entire analytics infrastructure would be a digital ghost town. But I didn't drive away. Not yet. I had one more task. From my personal laptop, I logged into my encrypted cloud storage and created a new folder. They're going to beg. Inside, I uploaded everything: the contracts, the communications, the proof of what I'd built and how they'd stolen it. Then I drafted one more document, this one for my lawyer, outlining exactly what would happen next and what we would demand when they came crawling back. Because they would come back. They had no choice. Brad could no more fix this than he could build a rocket to Mars. The vendor wouldn't help them. The contract was clear that only the designated administrator could authorize license changes. And every hour their system stayed dark would cost them thousands in lost revenue and damaged client relationships. I finally started the car, pulling out of the garage just as the first confused Slack messages began appearing on my personal account. Former colleagues asking if I knew why certain reports weren't updating. I archived them without responding. I was no longer a compensated employee of Brightspan Analytics. Their problems weren't my problems, at least, not until they made it worth my while. Tuesday morning arrived with 37 missed calls and 93 unread messages. I ignored them all, focusing instead on my breakfast: Eggs Benedict at the downtown Marriott. A luxury I denied myself while working 60-hour weeks. Through the window, I could see Brightspan's office tower, imagining the panic unfolding on the 14th floor. By noon, the desperation had evolved. Former colleagues who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly remembered my number. Kevin from DevOps left 3 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Amelia, please. We need to understand what's happening with the data flow license. Call me back, please. The Slack messages painted a beautiful picture of chaos. Someone had created an emergency channel called Heartsfy Critical Analytics Outage. I still had read access. They'd forgotten to revoke it in their rush to escort me out. The messages scrolled by like a disaster movie transcript. All dashboards are showing license errors. Client portal is completely down. We have a board presentation in 2 hours. Need the Q1 projections now. Where's Brad? Has anyone seen Brad? Brad, according to Jessica's increasingly angry messages, had called in sick. Probably sitting at home, staring at error logs he couldn't understand, realizing that taking credit and taking responsibility were vastly different things. At 2 p.m., Nathan tried calling. I let it ring, sipping my 3rd cappuccino of the day while browsing job postings I didn't need. Companies were already reaching out. News of Brightspan's technical difficulties was spreading through Riverton's tech community like wildfire. The real entertainment came from LinkedIn. Nathan had posted something about navigating technical challenges with leadership and vision that morning. By afternoon, the comments section had become a bloodbath. Former clients asking about service outages, competitors offering migration assistance. One particularly savage comment from a data engineer at a rival firm: maybe you should have led with better retention strategies for your key technical staff. Wednesday brought escalation. The calls were no longer from former peers, but from management. Sarah from HR, her voice tight with professional panic. Amelia, there seems to be some confusion about the transition process. We need to discuss your handover documentation. I didn't return that call either. The Slack channel had devolved into finger-pointing and blame-shifting. Sales was screaming about lost deals. Customer success reported 3 major clients threatening to terminate contracts. Finance couldn't generate reports for regulatory compliance due by end of week. Then came the revelation I'd been waiting for. Kevin, bless his thorough nature, had finally found the contract clause. His message in the emergency channel was a masterpiece of understated doom. Found the issue. Data flow license is tied to Emilia's employment status per addendum B, Article 7.3.2. Without her as designated administrator, we have no valid license. This isn't a technical problem, it's a legal one. The channel went silent for exactly 3 minutes. Then Nathan's response. Get legal in here. Now. I imagined Nathan's face when he realized his signature was on that addendum. The same document he'd mocked as engineering paranoia. The same clause he'd dismissed as irrelevant edge case planning. Thursday morning, the news broke publicly. TechCrunch ran a piece. Brightspan Analytics suffers major outage, clients exit. The stock price dropped 12% in pre-market trading. Harold Dunn was quoted saying it was a temporary technical adjustment that would be resolved within hours. He was lying. They'd already tried everything. Brad had attempted to contact Dataflow directly, only to be told that contract modifications required the designated administrator's authorization. They'd tried purchasing a new license, but Dataflow's legal team noted the existing contract explicitly prevented duplicate licenses for the same organization until the current agreement was resolved. They were trapped in a cage I'd built with their own arrogance. By Thursday afternoon, the Slack channel showed pure desperation. Someone suggested hiring an outside firm to rebuild the entire analytics infrastructure from scratch. The estimated timeline, 3 to 4 months. The estimated cost, $2 million. The estimated client retention during that period, 0. That evening, as I enjoyed dinner at Romano's, the place Nathan always bragged about expensing, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I recognized the writing style immediately. Rebecca Hale, Brightspan's chief legal counsel, the woman who never texted, never called, never communicated outside of formal channels. We need to talk. Tonight. Name your terms for a meeting. I finished my wine, considering. They'd lasted longer than expected, 4 full days of hemorrhaging money and reputation. But Rebecca reaching out personally meant they'd finally understood the complete scope of their situation. I texted back, tomorrow, 10 a.m., neutral location. Bring Harold and Nathan. And Rebecca, make sure they understand. This isn't a negotiation. It's a surrender. Her response was immediate. Understood. I smiled, signaling for the check. The next phase was about to begin. And unlike Monday's ambush in HR, this time I'd be the one setting the terms. They thought they'd eliminated a problem employee. Instead, they'd activated a shutdown sequence they couldn't abort. And tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what it would cost to turn the lights back on. The law offices of Mitchell & Associates occupied the top floor of a building that screamed neutrality. All glass and chrome, no soul. Perfect for the kind of conversation we were about to have. Rebecca had chosen well. I arrived 15 minutes early, giving myself time to review the documents my lawyer had prepared overnight. At exactly 10 a.m., they filed in like defendants approaching the bench. Harold Dunn looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His usually perfect silver hair disheveled, his designer suit wrinkled. Nathan followed, that political smile finally gone, replaced by something between rage and fear. Rebecca came last, carrying a leather portfolio that probably contained their first offer. An offer I wouldn't even need to hear. Amelia. Harold started, trying for his CEO voice, the one that usually commanded rooms. This situation has gotten out of hand. Has it? I asked, pulling out my phone to check the time. Your stock is down 18%. 3 major clients have terminated contracts. The SEC has questions about your Q1 reporting capabilities. Seems like everything's going exactly as expected. Nathan's jaw clenched. You sabotaged us. I resigned, I corrected. You fired me, actually. I simply followed the terms of a contract you signed. Page 47. If you've forgotten. Rebecca opened her portfolio, her movements precise despite the tension. We've reviewed the data flow agreement. The clause is unusual, but legally binding. Yeah, you mean the clause that ensures the person who built and maintains your entire analytics infrastructure can't be discarded like yesterday's coffee? I pulled out my own folder. Let's skip the part where you try to intimidate me with legal threats. Dataflow's lawyers have already confirmed the contract is ironclad. Harold leaned forward, his hands clasped like he was praying. What do you want? What I earned, I said, sliding my prepared document across the table. The bonus you refused to pay, $35,000, plus 40% for breach of contract and bad faith termination, plus the 6 months of overtime never compensated at standard rates, plus damages for intellectual property theft, every presentation where Nathan claimed my work as his own. Nathan started to speak, but Rebecca's hand on his arm stopped him. She was reading the document, her expression shifting from professional to shocked. You're asking for $480,000, she said quietly. And a public acknowledgement, I continued. A company-wide email from Harold personally, detailing my contributions to the Q4 success and the analytics infrastructure, and Nathan's resignation from the technical leadership team. He can keep his job, but not in any role overseeing engineering. That's extortion. Nathan spat. It's mathematics. I replied. You're losing approximately $200,000 per day in failed operations and lost clients. My demands represent 2.5 days of losses. Wait until Monday, and you won't have a company left to save. Harold's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling further. Johnson Industries just pulled out. That's $12 million in annual revenue. 12.3, actually, I corrected. I built the dashboard that tracks it, remember? Rebecca was already doing the calculation. Every hour they delayed cost more than what I was asking. Every minute we sat here, their company bled value. We need the systems restored immediately, Harold said, his CEO voice cracking. Today. The money transfers within the hour, I said. The email goes out before lunch. Nathan's reassignment is announced by end of day. Then, and only then, I contact Dataflow to restore the license. And if we refuse, Harold asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I stood up, gathering my papers. Then you explained to your board why you lost a $100 million company over a $35,000 bonus. I'm sure they'll find that math fascinating. Rebecca spoke quickly. We need guarantees, non-disclosure agreements, assurance you won't do this again. I don't need to do it again, I said. But yes, I'll sign an NDA after you meet my terms. As for guarantees, you had a guarantee. It was called an employment contract that promised bonuses for performance. You broke that guarantee. I just enforced the consequences. I moved toward the door, then paused. You have 1 hour to decide. After that, the price goes up 20% every day. By Monday, you won't be able to afford me even if you liquidate everything. Nathan's face was red now, his composure finally shattered. You planned this. From the beginning. No, I said, hand on the door handle. I planned for this. There's a difference. I hoped you'd be smart enough to pay what you owed. You weren't. So here we are. I looked directly at Harold. 1 hour. The transfer instructions are in the document. Oh, and Brad called in sick again today, didn't he? You might want to find someone who actually understands the systems before you fire the person who built them next time. The door closed on their silence, but I could feel the weight of their realization. They'd come thinking they had leverage, that they could negotiate, that their titles and positions meant something. But in that room, at that moment, they finally understood. I didn't need them. They needed me. And that, more than the money, more than the vindication, was worth everything. The call came at 10:47 a.m. Rebecca's voice was clipped, professional, defeated. The transfer is complete. Check your account. I refreshed my banking app. $480,000. Clean, immediate, real. The email, I asked. Harold is drafting it now. It will go out within the hour. And Nathan? A pause. He'll be transitioning to a business development role. The announcement goes out at 3 p.m. Then you'll have your systems back by noon, I said. Pleasure doing business with you, Rebecca. I hung up before she could respond, already composing my email to Dataflow Systems. The restoration would be simple: a single authorization, a license key update, everything back online as if nothing had happened. But first, I wanted to see Harold's email. It arrived at 11:23 a.m., sent to Alla Brightspan, com. I pulled it up on my laptop, reading each word slowly, savoring them like expensive wine. Team. I want to take a moment to correct a significant oversight from last week's Q4 celebration. The remarkable success of our analytics infrastructure is the direct result of Amelia Cross's exceptional technical leadership and innovation. Her architecture, coding, and system design were instrumental in achieving our record-breaking quarter. Amelia single-handedly built the real-time visualization system that transformed our client reporting capabilities. She developed the predictive algorithms that identified at-risk accounts, saving millions in potential lost revenue. The 18-month perfect uptime record exists because of her dedication, often working through nights and weekends to ensure system stability. We failed to properly recognize these contributions, and for that, I personally apologize. Amelia's work represents the best of engineering excellence, and Brightspan benefited immeasurably from her talent. Harold Dunn, CEO, Brightspan Analytics. My phone immediately started buzzing with messages from former colleagues, some apologetic, some confused, some angry they'd been left in the dark. I archived them all. Their opinions had stopped mattering the moment they'd stood silent while Nathan took credit for my work. At 11:45 a.m., I sent the authorization to Dataflow. 5 minutes later, Kevin messaged me privately. Systems are coming back online. Holy shit, Amelia. By 3 p.m., the analytics infrastructure was fully operational. Reports flowing, dashboards updating, clients receiving their data. Like waking from a nightmare. Except the nightmare had been very real and very expensive. Nathan's reassignment email went out as promised. The language was corporate neutral, but everyone could read between the lines. Pursuing new opportunities in business development was code for demoted for catastrophic failure. His LinkedIn would update within the week to show him at a different company entirely. His type never stayed around after a public humiliation. That evening, I sat in my apartment, watching the city lights flicker on. My phone rang. An unknown number with a Seattle area code. Amelia Cross? The voice was warm, confident. This is Diana Kim, CTO at Nexus Technologies. We've been following the situation at Brightspan. Impressive work. I'm not sure what you mean, I said carefully. She laughed. Of course not. But hypothetically, someone who could architect systems that critical and protect their value that effectively is exactly who we're looking for. We're building something revolutionary in predictive analytics. Real equity, not promises. 7-figure base, not including bonuses we actually pay. Interested? I looked at my laptop, where 3 other recruitment emails waited. The Brightspan incident had turned me into a legend in certain circles. The engineer who'd held a company hostage with their own contracts. I might be interested, I said, but I'll need to review any contracts very carefully. I wouldn't expect anything less, Diana replied. In fact, I'd be disappointed if you didn't. When can you fly out for a conversation? We scheduled a meeting for the following week. After hanging up, I opened my folder labeled "They're Going to Beg" and moved it to archive. That chapter was closed. But I created a new folder, Never Again. Inside, I started documenting lessons learned, contract clauses to always include, warning signs to recognize earlier, ways to protect value from those who would steal it. My phone buzzed with one final message, Harold Dunn, texting from his personal number. The board wants to discuss a consulting arrangement. Name your rate. I typed back, $2,500 per hour. Minimum 40-hour commitment. Payment in advance. His response was immediate. That's unreasonable. That's the cost of expertise you can't afford to lose twice, I replied. You know where to reach me when you're ready to be reasonable. I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop to research Nexus Technologies. Brightspan would survive, wounded, humbled, but functional. They'd learned an expensive lesson about the true value of the people who build their empires. And I'd learned something too. My worth wasn't determined by their recognition or their bonuses. It was encoded in every line of code, every system design, every solution I created. They'd tried to erase me from their success story. Instead, I'd written myself into their most expensive failure. The consulting request from Harold haunted them for weeks, every Monday, like clockwork. Another crisis would emerge from the systems I'd built. Not failures, but complexities only I understood. The authentication protocol that cycled through 7 different encryption keys. The data pipeline that required manual cache clearing every 1,247 hours. The reporting module with undocumented dependencies I'd never bothered to map because they lived in my head. Brad had lasted exactly 6 days after the systems came back online before submitting his resignation. His replacement, a senior engineer poached from Microsoft with a $300,000 signing bonus, called me directly after his first week. "I need 3 hours of your time," Marcus said, his voice tight with frustration. "There's a recursive function in the prediction algorithm that's brilliant, but I can't figure out why it works. My rate is $2,500 per hour. I know. Harold authorized it. Can you do tomorrow?" I smiled, opening my calendar. "I can do Thursday, payment in advance." The money hit my account Wednesday night. Thursday morning, I walked back into Brightspan's offices for the first time since security had escorted me out. The reception desk had fresh flowers, white roses, probably meant to suggest peace. The security guard who checked me in was Gary, the same one who'd watched me pack my desk. "Good to see you again, Ms. Cross," he said quietly, sliding the visitor badge across the counter. "Real good." The 14th floor felt different, quieter. The energy drinks and pizza boxes that used to litter the common areas during crunch time were gone. The whiteboards that once held my system diagrams now displayed motivational quotes about collaborative success and team integrity. Marcus met me in what used to be my conference room. He'd spread out printed copies of my code across the entire table, annotations in 3 different colors, sticky notes creating a rainbow of confusion. "This recursive function," he said without preamble, pointing to a section highlighted in yellow, "it shouldn't work. By every principle of computer science, it should create an infinite loop." I looked at the code, remembering the night I'd written it, 2 a.m., running on coffee in spite after Nathan had publicly questioned my approach in front of the entire team. "It's not really recursive," I explained, pulling out a marker. "Look at line 347. The function appears to call itself, but it's actually calling a modified shadow copy that decrements a hidden variable in the system memory. The loop terminates when the shadow copy hits a threshold that's calculated based on the time of day and server load." Marcus stared at me. "That's insane." "That's job security," I corrected. "Or it was supposed to be." We spent 3 hours going through the system's quirks. The database queries that looked inefficient but were actually optimized for Brightspan's specific data patterns. The monitoring alerts that seemed random but followed a pattern based on Fibonacci sequences. The backup system that required manual intervention every full moon, literally. Tied to lunar cycles because I'd been feeling poetic and angry when I coded it. "You built a maze," Marcus said finally, a mixture of admiration and horror in his voice. "I built a masterpiece," I said. "They just never bothered to learn how it worked. They assumed it would always be there, like assuming the sun would rise." As I prepared to leave, Harold appeared in the doorway. He looked better than he had during our surrender meeting, his suit pressed, his confidence partially restored by the flowing revenue. But his eyes carried something new, respect mixed with fear. "Amelia," he said carefully, "thank you for coming. You paid for my time. No thanks necessary." He shifted uncomfortably. "The board has approved a permanent consulting arrangement, 50 hours monthly, At your rate, we need someone who understands what you built. No, I said simply, packing my bag. We'll double the rate. Still no. His composure cracked slightly. What would it take? I looked around the office, at the desks where my former colleagues avoided eye contact, at the conference rooms where my ideas had been stolen, at the servers humming with systems that bore my fingerprints in every line of code. Nothing, I said. There's nothing you could offer that would make me permanent again. You'll get emergency consultations when I'm available, at my rate, with advance payment. But permanent? You had that. You threw it away for $35,000. I walked past him toward the elevator, then stopped. Oh, and Harold? The system will need a major security update in about 3 months. The current encryption certificates expire July 31st. Marcus has the documentation. But the process is complex. You might want to budget about 40 hours of consulting time. The elevator doors closed on his stricken expression, 40 hours at $2,500 per hour. Another $100,000 lesson in valuing the people who build your kingdom. As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a message from Diana at Nexus Technologies. My background check had cleared. The offer letter was ready. A future where my contributions would be valued, documented, and protected by ironclad contracts I'd write myself. Brightspan would survive, bleeding money to maintain systems they'd never bothered to understand. And every check they wrote would remind them of the cost of their arrogance. 6 months later, I stood in Nexus Technologies' Seattle headquarters, watching the sunrise paint Mount Rainier gold through floor-to-ceiling windows. My new office, yes, they'd given me an actual office with a door that closed, was everything Brightspan had never been. The equity statements, the bonuses that arrived exactly when promised. The CEO who introduced me as the architect of our future without a trace of irony. My phone buzzed. Marcus, still at Brightspan, with his monthly update that I never asked for but always received. July 31st. Certificates expired. System down for 14 hours. Harold had to approve emergency payment of $75,000 to external consultants just to get partial restoration. They still need you to fix the rest. I archived the message without responding. They'd made their choice. Every crisis, every emergency, every desperate call. They were all echoes of that Thursday afternoon when Nathan had said my bonus didn't pass approval. The news about Brightspan's acquisition came through official channels 2 weeks later. Purchased by a competitor for 40 cents on the dollar of their Q4 valuation. Harold would get his golden parachute, of course. The board would protect their own. But the company that had once promised to revolutionize analytics would become just another absorbed subsidiary, their name gradually disappearing from contracts and websites. Rebecca emailed me the day the acquisition closed. They're dissolving the technical team. Marcus is leaving. The new owners want to rebuild everything from scratch. Thought you should know. 3 years of my work, erased. Not by malice this time, but by the simple economics of corporate consumption. Somehow, that felt like justice too. My systems dying not in darkness, but in the harsh light of due diligence that revealed how desperately they'd needed me. I pulled up the dataflow contract one last time, reading that beautiful clause that had changed everything. Then I deleted it. That chapter was truly closed now. My new team at Nexus knocked on my door, 3 junior engineers, eager and brilliant, ready for our morning architecture review. I'd been teaching them not just how to build systems, but how to protect their value, how to document everything, how to ensure their contributions could never be erased or stolen, how to hide kill switches in plain sight, wrapped in legal language that executives sign without reading. Remember, I told them as we gathered around the whiteboard, your code is your leverage, your knowledge is your power, and your contracts are your insurance policy. One of them, a young woman named Lisa who reminded me of myself 3 years ago, raised her hand. What if they don't value what we build? I smiled, thinking of Harold's text from last night, the one I hadn't answered. Please, name any price. We need you. Then you teach them, I said, picking up a marker. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that cost exactly what they should have paid in the first place. The morning sun was fully up now, flooding the room with light, somewhere in Riverton. Brightspan's servers were probably struggling, their new owners discovering that acquiring a company and understanding its infrastructure were vastly different things. Nathan had updated his LinkedIn to show he was seeking new opportunities. Brad had pivoted to project management at a nonprofit. And me, I was exactly where I deserved to be. Not because I'd destroyed them, that had been their choice, their actions, their consequences, but because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of corporate life. Never let them tell you what you're worth. Show them what it costs when you're gone. I turned to face my team, marker in hand, ready to build something new, something better, something with my name permanently encoded in every contract, every commit, every line of code. All right, I said, pulling up our latest project. Let's talk about redundancy, documentation, and why you should always read the fine print. The whiteboard filled with diagrams and possibilities. Behind us, through those perfect windows, Mount Rainier stood unchanged, solid, immovable, permanent, like well-written code, like ironclad contracts. Like the kind of revenge that pays $480,000 and teaches an entire industry that engineers are not expendable. They'd tried to erase me from their success story. Instead, I became the most expensive lesson they ever learned. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and sweet justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of contracts and consequences, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a similar situation at work? What would you have done in Amelia's position? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to share this story with someone who needs to hear that their value is non-negotiable.